Petr Mrazek is the latest member of the Chicago Blackhawks to sign a 2-year contract extension. On today's episode, I'll be breaking down the deal and the future outlook in net for the Blackhawks, and I'll also be talking about the latest updates that we have from the Team Canada U18 World Junior lawsuit. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2, and make sure to also go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also, quick reminder to everyone out there, if you're watching the YouTube version of this episode, make sure to hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. And for all of my audio listeners out there as well, make sure to be regularly downloading those episodes. It really does help me out. And also go in, rate, and review the podcast. It only takes 2 seconds as well. And I also got to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by the Sleeper app, the go-to platform for daily fantasy sports. And right now, if you use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, then you'll get up to an $100 match on your first deposit with Sleeper. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. And to kick things off here on the show today, as I expected when I talked about this topic of conversation a couple of days ago, Petr Mrazek is the latest member of the Blackhawks to sign a 2-year contract extension with the team, following a suit with Nick Foligno and Jason Dickinson here in the last couple of weeks. Mrazek's deal also runs through the 2025-2026 season, 2-year extension for him that carries a $4.25 million cap hit. The same exact deal that Jason Dickinson signed not all that long ago. And on the show two days ago, when I talked about a mock deal for Petr Mrazek, I expected it, yes, to also be a 2-year term. I guessed the AAV would be somewhere between $3.5 to $4 million, but I have absolutely no problem with Mrazek getting a little bit more than that, and you shouldn't either, Blackhawks fans. And I feel like there's some kind of misunderstanding out there as far as why Mrazek is getting paid so much, or even why Jason Dickinson or Nick Foligno are getting paid so much as well. Truthfully, it is a non-factor, Blackhawks fans, and I don't really know how much more I need to emphasize this, but the Blackhawks basically have all the money in the world these next 2 summers, unlimited money, some may say, and kind of based on not only just the deals that they've made here recently, but there's also been some speculation over the last month or so about the path that the Blackhawks are going to take this summer and the following summer as well in pursuit of free agents. I think 2025, the summer of 2025, is going to be far more intriguing for the Chicago Blackhawks, and they'll also have a little bit better of an understanding as to what they already have here in Chicago and with their prospect pool. So I don't expect them to be throwing out all that much money next summer in terms of trying to land a big fish. And because of that, doesn't really seem like the Blackhawks window of opportunity in terms of contention again is really going to be opened up until, at the very least, the start of the 2025-2026 season. And truthfully, it could even be longer than that. So it doesn't really matter how much money the Blackhawks are shelling out at this point in time. With that being the situation, Kyle Davidson is clearly still wanting to take a very patient approach with everything, not going to rush into anything that's going to harm this Blackhawks team long-term. And that's why we see these deals with Jason Dickinson, Nick Foligno, and Petr Mrazek being 2-year contracts, because it's not really going to hurt the team during that 2-year stretch. And second, Petr Mrazek is such a respected locker room guy and really could be a good mentor and a good leader to the young netminders here in the organization. And of course, he's well deserving of the reward as well for how spectacular he's played all season long. And we see the difference in this Blackhawks team when it's Arvid Soderblom versus Petr Mrazek. Another Tough start for Soderblom last night in Seattle. He's now given up 13 goals in his 2 career appearances at Climate Pledge Arena. Probably not his favorite place in the world, but you see the clear difference in the Blackhawks when Soderblom's in net compared to Mrazek. Arvid just isn't able to make those big-time, game-changing type of stops that can keep the Blackhawks alive, like Petr Mrazek has basically done all season long. That's what the Blackhawks need in order to hang in there with these teams, especially when they're as depleted as they are right now. They need superb goaltending, and Petr Mrazek has been giving them that basically all year long. He's 12, 17, and 1 on the season and 30 starts, has a 3.01 goals against average, 907 save percentage. I know those numbers don't pop off the charts, but considering the Blackhawks are the second worst defensive team in all of hockey and have the second worst goal differential in all of hockey as well, those numbers are pretty spectacular. And go and look at what Arvid Soderblom's numbers are compared to that. So Mrazek is absolutely deserving of this. He's been red hot here as of late too. Has given up 3 goals or fewer in 7 consecutive starts. And it's really impressive, again, with all the injuries and all the pieces that the Blackhawks are missing right now. So for multiple different reasons, this contract extension only makes sense for the Blackhawks to bring back Petr Mrazek. And coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'll dive more into that, why it makes sense to bring Mrazek back, and I'll also touch on the outlook in net for the Hawks over the next couple of years. But first, I need to talk to you all about Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Connor Bedard could return from his injury and still win the Calder Trophy. The Winnipeg Jets could be on their way to the President's Trophy. Austin Matthews could be on his way to scoring 60 goals once again, and you could be winning big alongside him by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. And Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because all you have to do is pick whether studs like Cale Makar, Nathan McKinnon, or Connor McDavid are going to have more or less than their Sleeper projections for goals, assists, points, shots, and more in any given game. Plus, you also have the opportunity to win 100 times your cash. So start paying attention, make the right picks, and you could be winning real big. And right now, go and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, and you'll get up to an $100 match on your first deposit with Sleeper. Again, promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, and you can also go and see Sleeper's terms of use right now for more details. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, the Blackhawks take on the red-hot Edmonton Oilers tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. The Oilers have rattled off 14 consecutive wins, and they are currently minus 650 favorites in this matchup here with the Hawks tonight. It's the third and final meeting between these two teams this season, and you can catch all of the Blackhawks hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. All you have to do is go and search Blackhawks. Segment 2, getting into an outlook in net for the Blackhawks moving forward now that Mrazek is signed on for 2 years, and really looking at the goaltender depth in the rest of the pipelines, with Arvid Soderblom not taking that step at the NHL level like the organization or us fans were hoping for going into the start of this year. Yeah, Blackhawks basically need Petr Mrazek, and looking at their depth with those struggles of Soderblom, it's apparent why the Blackhawks couldn't trade Petr Mrazek, because they had no other options. They would have to take a goaltender back, and he would have to be a worthwhile guy that they could plug in as their number one for the rest of the year. And then even then, they'd have to go back out to the free agent market and add another goaltender next year to bring back, because it's clear Arvid Soderblom isn't ready to be the starter of the Chicago Blackhawks next year, and they need someone to hold down that number one role. And I think Petr Mrazek is a pretty clear fit for that these next couple of seasons as we kind of bridge over just to the competitive window for the Blackhawks again, and also the future of what's coming in net for the Blackhawks. So as far as it goes for the 2024-2025 season, Blackhawks fans, I think we're just going to see the same exact duo once again in net. Petr Mrazek serving as the starter and Arvid Soderblom serving as the backup. And it's obviously an unfortunate start to Soderblom's first full NHL campaign. Has not gone the way anyone wanted it to go. And yes, there obviously with that have to be questions as to whether or not he can be an NHL goaltender and what does his future look like here in Chicago. But he is still under contract through the end of next season. I fully expect the Blackhawks to give him the opportunity to be the backup once again. And quite honestly, it does definitely suck that the Blackhawks have dealt with all these injuries and they haven't really been able to progress or show the fan base or the organization the promise or the bright spots or the intrigue moving forward. They haven't really been able to show all that. But it also does allow for Arvid Soderblom to get another opportunity next year. Yes, there's going to be more pressure, but I want to say it's not the end of the world that this first year for him hasn't gone to plan, because it'll allow him to get this experience. Hopefully he'll get some momentum here at the end of the year leading into next year, but I'm sure the Blackhawks aren't going to be as confident as they were heading into this season, but he'll still have an opportunity to go and prove that he can be an NHL goaltender next season. And, if all goes well, then I'm sure there'll probably be more of a 1A, 1B split for the Blackhawks, but it is going to allow us to find out a little bit more about what Arvid Soderblom has in the tank. Is he an NHL goaltender or is he not? As of right now, it's pointing towards the not direction, but we're going to find out for sure by the end of his contract, which ends at the end of next year. As far as what I think could be happening with the Rockford IceHogs next season, Blackhawks fans, this is worth mentioning as well, because you got to keep in mind the plans for the guys down in Rockford and how it kind of affects what's going on with the big league club. So obviously right now in Rockford, there's kind of a three-headed goalie tandem, as Mike Folta mentioned when he joined the show last week. Make sure to go and check out that episode with IceHogs play-by-play broadcaster Mike Folta. Really always appreciate Mike coming on the show and sharing his insight and his thoughts on some of the high-end prospects and just the Rockford IceHogs team as a whole down there in the AHL. Go and check that out if you haven't done so already. But Mike kind of told us that, yeah, there's a three-headed duo or three-headed tandem going on down there in Rockford right now between Drew Commesso, Jackson Stauber, and Mitchell Weeks. And for Drew Commesso, he's obviously the most notable one of that bunch, high-end prospect for the Blackhawks, someone that I've been really high on these last handful of seasons. But I firmly expect that they're going to want him to be the number one in Rockford again next year. I really don't see him getting rushed to the NHL level unless there's an injury to Petr Mrazek or Arvid Soderblom. And again, the patient approach from Kyle Davidson in this front office, I think, is going to remain in effect, especially with goaltenders, which is just a position that takes longer to develop. You just need high-end experience, really. It's just tough to develop when you're not playing against quality level of competition. So I like what I've seen out of Drew Commesso in his first professional campaign, but I do think they're going to want to allow him to get comfortable and be the number one in Rockford next year. But I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with the rest of this goaltender group, because Jackson Stauber, people mention Stauber to me all the time just because he had that good NHL stint with the Blackhawks last year. Hasn't been very good in Rockford, though, since turning pro, and he is going to be a restricted free agent at the end of the year. And you got to wonder if the Blackhawks are going to want to bring him back with, Mitchell Weeks also in the pipelines. And then Dominic Basse, I genuinely don't know if the Blackhawks have intrigue for Basse or not, but I think he's worth a shot and probably has better upside than Mitchell Weeks and maybe Jackson Stauber based on what we've seen from him in Rockford the last year and a half or so. I will give Mitchell Weeks his credit, even though he's been an ECHL netminder for most of his career. He's played in 4 games for the IceHogs this year and put up some good numbers, 3-1 record, 2.5 goals against, 901 save percentage, but I don't see much of a future in net for Mitchell Weeks personally. So I think, they'd probably choose Stauber or Basse over Weeks if I have to guess, but really curious to see if there's going to be a three-headed tandem down there again next year, if they're going to want to go with Commesso and Stauber, or if they're going to want to sign Dominic Basse to an ELC and maybe have him be the backup to Drew Commesso. That's going to be really curious. But then that bridges us over into the 2025-2026 season. This is when I think, the Blackhawks are going to be coming off of the summer 2025. There's a lot of big name free agents on the market. I think they're going to be spending some money then, if I had to guess. And I also believe this is when Drew Commesso, if all goes well, is going to come up to the NHL level. And that's also obviously the last year of Petr Mrazek's deal. So I do think Mrazek will probably go in as the starter once again. I know this is 2 years down the road, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but this is probably the plan that I think the Blackhawks have in their minds. Mrazek to start 2024-25 is their number one. Same again in 2025-26. But then I do think that's when Drew Commesso is going to come up, and like Arvid Soderblom is doing this year, that's when I think Commesso is going to serve as his backup. And if Arvid Soderblom does show some signs of life, it's going to be really intriguing to see how the Blackhawks kind of handle that. But Drew Commesso being a second-round pick undeniably has higher upside in my mind. I think that's probably the decision that they go with if it came down to the two, but a lot can change in 2 years' time. But I do want to point out Mrazek could be traded either at the deadline, the 2026 NHL trade deadline, or maybe even heading into this year if the Blackhawks have options in net. But I would be a little surprised to see Petr Mrazek end this deal with the Blackhawks, especially because they could retain half of that $4.25 million, get it down to about $2 million. Teams will also have more financial wiggle room at that point with the salary cap expecting to go up significantly. And the Blackhawks, I'm sure, would be able to trade Petr Mrazek and get some more assets in return if they're capable, if they're willing to go with Commesso or someone else as their backup, if all other circumstances make sense in the organization as well. And then I do want to shout out Adam Guyan, because obviously he was the first goaltender off the board in the 2023 NHL draft when the Blackhawks took him at number 35 overall. He's still playing in the USHL with the Green Bay Gamblers right now. And then next year, 2024-25, fall of 2024, he's going to be a freshman at the University of Minnesota Duluth. I probably expect him to play at least 3 years there with the Bulldogs, if I had to guess, just based on how goalies usually go about things in college hockey, right? Commesso played 3 years there. I think at the very least, Adam Guyan is at least going to play 3 years with Minnesota Duluth, and, probably isn't going to be ready for the NHL level until like 2027. But there's kind of the outlook in that I believe the Blackhawks are going to be rolling with these next couple of seasons. And it's going to be fascinating to see Drew Commesso continuing to develop down in Rockford. Who else the Ice Hogs are going to be adding to their goaltender group, or are they going to be re-signing Stauber or keeping Mitchell Weeks? And also what ends up happening with Arvid Soderblom the rest of the way this year, and also in his second full-time NHL campaign, as I do expect him to still remain as the Blackhawks backup heading into next year. All right, there are my thoughts on the future in net for the Chicago Blackhawks. Coming up in just a moment here, a quick trigger warning. I will be talking about the updates regarding the 2018 Team Canada World Junior lawsuit. But first, I need to talk to you all about, where is Indeed? Oh, there it is. I need to talk to you all about Indeed. There's no I in team, but there is an I in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform that you need to build your company. Because when you're hiring, Indeed is the only job site out there where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. So instead of spending countless hours on multiple job sites hoping to somehow find the right candidates, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all, and that is Indeed. Indeed streamlines the hiring process with powerful tools that find you matched candidates in an instant. And I personally love Indeed because it is the only job site out there where you only pay for applications that meet those must-have requirements. And Indeed knows that when you're growing your business, you got to make every dollar count. So do just that by visiting Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring right now. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, thank you all to everyone who regularly watches and listens to the show. I greatly appreciate it. If you're watching here today, make sure to help me out by hitting that like button, commenting down below, and subscribing. And if you're tuning into the audio version, make sure to go and rate and review, preferably with a nice review and a 5-star rating. That always does help me out tremendously. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel here on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, segment 3, not an easy thing to talk about on the show here today, Blackhawks fans. And I do want to give a quick warning to everyone out there who may be listening or watching this on YouTube, as I will be getting into the sexual assault charges and the lawsuit against the 2018 Team Canada World Juniors team. And I know that's not an easy thing for people to watch or people to listen to. So just a quick warning here real quick. But after years and years of ongoing investigations and just a crazy kind of path to get to this day, to put it simply. Yesterday, 5 members of Canada's 2018 World Juniors team were told to surrender to the London, Ontario Police Department to face charges of sexual assaults. And the players have not yet been charged or officially named, but they have been given a period of time in which they can turn themselves into the London police. And one thing I do want to make sure to let you all know, I'm not going to get into the details of the report or the incident or everything that happened. If you're wanting to know more and you don't already know the situation, you can easily find multiple well-written articles by The Athletic, TSN. Rick Westhead has been on top of all of this stuff, just like he was with the Kyle Beach situation a couple of years ago. If you want more information, you can definitely go and find it out on the internet. I'm not going to get into all of those details here today. And while I am happy that these players are finally going to be held accountable for their actions after all of these years, that's kind of what also makes me really saddened at the same time, is how long this process took. I mean, this was something that happened in January of 2018, and how just details along the way have been kind of swept under the rug. And this isn't anything new in the game of hockey, right? Like us Blackhawks fans know details swept under the rug is something that happens often in hockey, unfortunately. The Kyle Beach situation that happened, and also with the Corey Perry situation, like, we don't know what happened. And because we don't know what happened, because they don't give us any information, that leaves the internet left to speculate, when that they should just be clear and be open with all of these details. But they don't, because they're a business and they're worried about money, and they don't care about anything besides money. They don't care about anything besides money. And it's really pathetic. And it's also pathetic how these players were allowed to, this incident happened in 2018. We're in 2024, 6 years ago, over 6 years. These players were allowed to go turn pro, go and make millions of dollars, go unnamed for 6 years, and play for multiple professional organizations before something actually ended up happening to them. And I just think that's rather sad and synonymous with just the culture and the game of hockey. And it's really sad. And it's not surprising to me, unfortunately, because I've been doing the show for a lot of years. I've been following the NHL for over 2 decades now. And this stuff isn't surprising, because this is how they operate. And quite honestly, I'm shocked that we're even getting to this point where details are going to be released. And London, the London Police Department is also going to be holding a press conference on Monday, February 5th. Definitely something everyone should circle out there, because it looks like we're going to hear some information on the reports and just actually getting disclosure here in this case, which caught me by surprise, because I just know the NHL and hockey as a hush-hush sport, a hush-hush league. And it's sad that that's that, but that's just the reality of the situation and the nature of the beast. But I'm really hoping that things will head in the better direction as a result of this. But obviously a really unfortunate circumstance that, man, it's just really sad that it's prevalent here in the game of hockey, that stuff like this continues to happen. But I did want to be sure to bring up on the show here today, Blackhawks fans, that Boris Katchouk and Taylor Radish were both members of this Team Canada World Juniors roster. And I'm not going to lie to you, I've always thought it was a little odd that they basically spent their whole development years together, like teammates on this World Junior team, both draft picks of the Tampa Bay Lightning. They both played in the AHL the same time frame, both came up to Tampa Bay together at the same timeline. And then, of course, both were traded to Chicago at the same point as part of the Brandon Hagel deal. I always thought that was, a little odd, of course, given what had gone on with the World Junior Canada team. But out of the 5 players that have taken leaves of absences in the last few days, and again, that doesn't guarantee that they're guilty or anything, and I'm not going to go and speculate on here, because that's not going to do me any good. It's not going to do anyone any good out there. But out of the 5 players that have taken a leave of absence, neither of them were Boris Katchouk nor Taylor Radish, which, again, I do want to clarify, does not mean they're in the clear. And we did hear Boris Katchouk comment on this matter following Blackhawks practice yesterday, saying, I haven't been involved. I wasn't involved, and I fully cooperated with everything that's been going on. We haven't heard from Taylor Radish yet on that front. And again, I do want to remind everyone, these guys are not officially in the clear here, but we don't know all of the details at this point in time. And it's still kind of a weird circumstance where 5 players are going to get charged, but there were 8 in that hotel room. Again, I'm not going to get into all of those details, but it's just an odd situation. And I just hope we get all the clarity and the open facts and just everything out there in the open for everyone to know. Nothing swept under the rug, nothing left left hidden, because this needs to come out. And if there's more stuff like this involved in Hockey Canada or in the NHL or in the game, it needs to come out, and it just needs to turn into a league that does the right thing. It feels like the NHL has just never done the right thing. So I'm glad to see them investigate into this matter and finally get somewhere on this, because it felt like for a long, long time that we were never going to figure out who those players were. They were never going to get punished, but it looks like they are going to face their day in court. And they have been officially told to go and turn themselves into the London, Ontario Police Department. I believe they were given a week to do so. So that should be happening in the next couple of days. And again, like I said, we're set to get an official press conference from the London police on Monday, February 5th. But again, a tragic situation. Thinking about the witness and everything that they had to go through throughout this time period, I'm sure it couldn't have been easy, but I hope they get some justice that they deserve here in this situation. And again, I'm sure we'll have more information, which is great to hear, on Monday, February 5th, when the London Police Department gives its press conference. All right, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2. It would really help me out tremendously. And also, go in, follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates, as I am on my way to 4,000 followers. Greatly appreciate all of that support. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Everyone, have a safe rest of your Thursday, and I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.